Other Tigers news nationally, Jim Leyland, former manager, two-time World Series appearance with the Tigers, was inducted to the Hall of Fame a couple Saturdays ago, and then was his number was retired by the Tigers. And I guess I don't have a problem with it. He's a wonderful man by all accounts. He's beloved by anyone who knows him. Longtime baseball guy. He's been in the majors in different capacities for 50 years. Um, Everybody loves the guy. I do too. I'm not sure he deserves his number to be retired by the Tigers. He never won the World Series. And that's one of the, when I think of Jim Leyland, I think of underachievement and frustration as much as anything, even though it was a golden era in some ways of Tiger baseball. They never got over the hump. And I almost think it's a disservice to Sparky Anderson, whose number is retired on the brick wall in center field at Comerica Park. You know, he did win the World Series with the Tigers in '84. He was certainly a Hall of Famer. His resume, he was I believe, the first manager in Major League history to win a World Series with in both leagues, as he was manager for the Big Red Machine in the mid '70s, Cincinnati. Then to one of the greatest teams in history, the 1984 Tigers. Uh, I just feel like Jim Leyland never accomplished what the goal was. So I don't want to take things away from him, and I'm not gonna, you know, if I ever go back to Comerica Park, I'm certainly not gonna graffiti his or deface his number or anything like that. I'm not that bitter about it. I don't think it just doesn't seem right to me, because when I think of those Tiger teams, I think of underachievement, and a lot of it comes down to Jim Leyland. And he had an owner who would spend outrageously to support that team throughout that era. He had the players. He had multiple Cy Young Award winners on that roster. He had multiple MVPs in both Miguel Cabrera and Justin Verlander. They won a ton of games, but they never won the most important games. They lost in 2006 to the 83 win St. Louis Cardinals. They only won one game in that World Series, and that was a little bit tainted with Kenny Rogers having some kind of foreign substance exposed on his thumb. Sticky stuff before we really knew what sticky stuff was all about. 2012, of course, they lost to your Giants, swept by your Giants, one of the most painful experiences of my life. They were just completely listless and never really had a shot at any point in that series, and never felt they were competitive. It never felt in all four games there was anything to even cheer for. It was just a brutal experience, and I hold that on Jim Leyland. And so it just struck me as odd seeing his number retired by the Tigers. I think he has a Hall of Fame career, ironically enough. As a manager that's gone to multiple World Series, won this World Series with the Marlins in '97. He's got the resume to be a Hall of Famer, but I think specifically his Tiger resume doesn't warrant retiring his number and putting it next to Sparky Anderson. That's going to be unpopular in Detroit. I think everybody, because he's such a nice guy and everybody loves him. I had to put it out there. I've got this stupid podcast. I wanted to get that opinion out there. I don't know if anyone agrees with it. I don't know if it'll just annoy people or piss people off, but that's how I feel. So I don't know. You're loosely involved in this just because you beat Jim Leyland's Tigers in 2012. But I don't know if you had any thoughts about Leyland specifically. You there?
His win-loss record. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. His win-loss record with the Tigers is the whole reason he's even in this conversation. Because if you take the Tigers tenure out, he has a losing record with the team.
That's interesting.
If you remove the Tigers from this conversation, now who knows where he would have gone to manage? But just for the sake of discussion on this podcast, so he has the World Series win with the Marlins, and then they dismantled the team, and he had like 50 some wins the next year, and he had what could arguably be next to Shohei Ohtani, but like arguably like one of the greatest, like the greatest hitter that we'll ever see in in Barry Bonds on Pittsburgh for all those years, and actually Pittsburgh had some pretty talented teams, and I think he only had 3 winning seasons with the Pirates over like 9
Mm.
seasons. So I I almost think the Tigers had to retire his number because without the Tigers, he may not even be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
I don't
he built
know.
his resume with the Tigers as much as anything, but it's
I
just
agree with you
the other.
though.
He had. I mentioned Mike Ilitch would spend whatever it took to bolster that roster. He had general manager and Diamond Dave Dombrowski, as I like to call him, who would make crazy deals at the trade deadline every year to put the team over the top. And it just never happened, and that stink has to go lie on somebody. And it just I feel like everyone did their part except for the manager. The worst part, and I failed to mention earlier, is as painful as 2006 and 2012 were. 2013, the Tigers were the best team in baseball, and they didn't even get out of the ALCS as uh, Joaquin Benoit was brought into Game 2 in Boston after the Tigers won Game 1, only to give up the grand slam to David Ortiz, where the famous Torrey Hunter flying over the wall, goddamn corrupt Boston cop not doing his job, raised his arms iconically in the bullpen in celebration instead of providing security to the stadium. Uh, I think of that as the most critical and brutal moment in Tigers history. And then Leyland retired. He quit after that season, even though they would the next year have a rotation that had eventually 4 Cy Young Award winners, but they left it to Brad Ausmus to manage that season, which they made the playoffs but got swept out of the first round by the fucking Orioles
The
again.
ass man.
Yeah, the ass man. So I blame Leland for that too. That Ausmus is failing because they shouldn't have had to hire him in the first place if Leland would have just stuck around. I understand there's personal reasons he had to do that, and it probably crushed him far more than it crushed me losing that series and not winning that World Series in 2013. That's the year the Tigers really should have done it. Alas, we never even got there. So I have bitterness. I'm bitter when I think about those Tigers teams. It was so much fun, but they never got over the top, and it just to honor Leland just doesn't sit right with me. So.
Word Hole Media.